Hello, it's been a great honour to be asked to speak at the E Tipu summit this week, and I thought I'd do a little piece really for those of you who couldn't make it, so that you understood some of the messages I've got and some of the content, because I've had quite a few requests for that. So it's a very short 10-minute piece just on what I shared at the E Tipu event itself. Really interesting summit all around kind of New Zealand future food and fibre. Go next year if you can. So the topic really was, are we, New Zealand, as good as we think we are? That was the topic. So I wanted to take you through, on my view, the answers, if you like, to that question. But first, a little bit about HRA. As many of you know, we're really well known in food and agri, working up and down the value chain all across the world, from North America, South America, obviously Europe, but Asia and Australia, New Zealand as well. Our expertise is three areas really. It's commercial strategy, commercial support, and market insights, all around that food chain as well, from, if you like, genetics and seed inputs at one end to finished goods and securing listings with retailers at the other end as well. And we've been trusted by over 200 clients in over 20 countries. So, and the last 15 years, it's been an absolute pleasure to help a bunch of New Zealand firms get real inroads into Europe and North America and obviously the UK. We have a lot of expertise around the globe. So this is our global team. There's nearly 100 people all around. I haven't put the blobs on New Zealand to spare a few brushes at the moment, but you can get the feeling that it's a big global business. And we've got, if you like, specialists in all sorts of specialisms within agri and in food and in different countries as well. So it's a lot of fun for me to knock around with this cohort who really are experts at the top of their game. In terms of some of the brands we've worked with, I'm sure you've seen many of these brands, but kind of Weetabix, Fairtrade, Green and Blacks, Alpro, Yazoo, Toblerone, all these sorts of companies. And in terms of New Zealand companies, we've worked pretty much in all the major food exporting verticals, from wine to primary ag to dairy to protein, vitamins, minerals, finished goods, FMCG, cosmetics. We supported, I think, about 40 New Zealand companies over the last sort of 10 years. So a big breadth of experience and a really good understanding of the exporter mindset, really, and unlocking opportunities. So I think, are we as good as we think we are? And I think you'd have to start with that global recognition for clean and green and premium. I think that is a fact. And there are some amazing world-class firms setting the standards, I think, in quality, sustainability and innovation. But really, that whilst that is true, does it mean that the bar is static? Does it mean that's universally understood? How do international consumers, retailers, and crucially trade buyers see us? So are we coasting along on kind of legacy perceptions, or are we actually raising that bar? And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to unpack today. So we'll have a look at red meat, dairy, wine, ag, avocados, and maybe some clues about how we can move things forward. So if you take red meat, what is known globally is the natural pasture-raised system and strong animal welfare that underpin the reputation. And the New Zealand brand, kind of from New Zealand, carries global weight, and it has connotations of purity, food safety, and environmental quality. And there is lots of traceability and big, the money talks and the export volumes talk. So I think, it's a very significant industry. But I think actually, if you dig into it, we all know that, some of the challenges in the sector, but a lot of the brands for me are positioning on price rather than brand. And I think the opportunity really is narrative, is storytelling, is category vision. We have this opportunity to move beyond the sort of grass-fed and clean message to better resonate with today's market and today's buyer. So I think our view would be that a lot of the businesses can be siloed with limited kind of industry-wide strategies, and actually a more expansive view would be needed, really. So I think what are the three keys that I would give to the red meat sector? Are we doing enough to differentiate? How are we going beyond clean and green? Question two, kind of how can we build premium narratives and branded experience for end consumers, really, be they retail or food service or wholesale. And a lot of our work is to help companies do that. But for me, that's one of the golden keys to unlock new customers. And sitting above all of that, what does it take to move from commodity to, if you like, cult brand status in global red meat? And again, there are some answers to that as well. So I think red meat starts in a great place, but could be better. And there could be some levers to do that. I think if you look at dairy, obviously scale is something that NZ does incredibly well. But actually, on differentiation and innovation, actually there's some, there's some challenges. And it's obviously key to be cost competitive, particularly in bulk commodities, AMF, powders, butters. And New Zealand is the global powerhouse. But is that reputation keeping pace? So I think, a lot of the exports are commodity focused, makes a lot of sense on a lot of levels, and we've seen some big moves in that sense. But I'd also like to see a kind of more branded, innovative strategy coming through on some of the dairy firms. And I really do think there's scope to expand into more premium offerings. And I think if I had a critique of dairy, that there's a lack of a defined kind of next level tier of dairy products on the global stage. Where are the challengers coming out of New Zealand to disrupt some of these overseas markets? And I think the other thing is a lot of R&D is actually focused on efficiency, not innovation, which is fine, and there's definitely a balance to be struck. But processing exports rather than value added dairy, if that's your focus, you're not going to actually come through on premium as well. So I think part of the exam question for dairy as a whole is designing products for export markets versus actually we need to stick on a boat what we already make. And that's a different mindset, I think, and be very clear about what business you're in of those two, really. And secondly, we're kind of, how can you better communicate the product stories beyond the price point? Because that's the key to our success if we can do that. Again, that sort of narrative that I was talking about in terms of red meat. Sauvignon and wine, very synonymous with New Zealand. Some amazing vintages, some incredible varietals and wineries. But the future in wine, in a world where climate is moving the vines and new countries are coming in, there is this evolving narrative about terroir and about kind of flavour profiles and use cases, really. So, can we go beyond the amazing Sauvignon from Marlborough? We all know about its freshness, its vibrant acidity, its distinctive character. Things for me that I think are really encouraging are the Sustainable Wine Growing Program. The industry itself has got very solid environmental credibility, and that's a major asset in kind of eco-conscious markets for a commodity that ultimately is discretionary. And our wine commands some of the highest prices per litre. We've done that analysis in lots of countries. And that reflects a strong brand equity and reputation, which is great. However, the slightly darker side of that is there is this over-reliance on Sauvignon, where kind of over 85% of those wine exports are Sauvignon, which means other varietals are kind of under-promoted internationally. So where are the other challenger varietals that are coming through? I think the other thing for me is that there's a limited regional diversity. We under leverage sub-regional identities. Kind of, if you ask shoppers overseas, they struggle to name regions beyond Marlborough. And there are some amazing regions, and they're just not cutting through in the same way with the shopper. And if they did, you'd see the needle really move. And then the last challenge really is kind of scale versus kind of global visibility. And actually, as kind of, whisper it quietly, but as a relatively small producer on the world stage, we risk being overshadowed by the louder wine nations who have deeper pockets. So I think there's two keys for me. Are we doing enough to diversify varietals and regions in export storytelling? Are we romancing the trade buyer? Are we romancing the end shopper about our regions and our fantastic varietals? And how can our wine, kind of allied to that, solidify its premium positioning as competition continues to grow from Europe, from North America, South America, and other destinations as well? So, the bar is really moving and motoring upwards on wine. Are we doing enough to keep in touching distance of it? And with, if you like, all of that, with a focus on those kind of dairy support crops in ag, have we missed the chance to lead in future fit ag? New Zealand has this amazing blend of natural and technical strength. So you've got lovely fertile soils coming into contact with that wonderful climate, abundant water. So you've got those ideal conditions for pasture-based farming. And obviously you've got amazing institutions that buttress the sector, like ag research. And that advances things like pasture management and animal health. But there's a couple of challenges, really. You know, are we getting locked into legacy models where innovation is hindered by both regulatory, the trickle we create ourselves, and market inertia? And then allied to that, are we too focused on being efficient farmers and not enough on being brand and experience creators? Because that truly is where the value is. So, what are the clues about how we could stay competitive? Well, kind of the first one is diversification. So my view is we need an emphasis on dairy-related crops, but as well higher value climate resilience crops. So there's a balance to be struck between the two. And also, this landscape's moving. It really is moving at pace. So, with the GM ban set to lift by the end of this year, there's this window for innovation in drought resistant and high yield seed development. But of course, that cuts two ways. Does this also introduce new risks for the future of our ag sector? So, there's a lot to think about when you look through the lens of New Zealand ag. And if we took avocados as well, kind of the industry is continuing to grow. Obviously, we've got pressure from what I call the three C's, so climate, costs, and competition. And New Zealand's done a great job at positioning its avocados as premium and sustainably grown, obviously leveraging off clean and green and the ideal growing conditions in what is frankly a fickle crop. I mean, avocados really wouldn't be reproducing without human intervention. And obviously, after a couple of really tough seasons, so 24, 25 saw a rebound with strong yields and those kind of increased volumes, most of which goes to Australia. But I know for a fact that you're expanding actively into Asian markets to reduce that reliance on a single market in Australia and tap into these new regions with growing demand, really. So there's a couple of things that are obviously going well, but there's some challenges as well. And I'd point to crop consistency, and we all know about that climate variability, but it's hit crop quality and yield hard. And 23-24 was one of the lowest export volumes in a decade. And we've also got that increased competition where New Zealand contributes less than 2% of global avocado supply and really has tough competition from other low-cost producers, so Peru, Mexico, for instance. And there's logistical and cost challenges because Australia's domestic production is ramping up, which reduces their reliance on New Zealand, which of course causes some exports redirected back into New Zealand, causing oversupply and price drops. So you've got a sort of closed loop system, and there's some clouds on the horizon. So the two key challenges really is how can New Zealand stay competitive in a market dominated by low cost producers? And one of the things I really feel is looking at kind of genetics and seed and breeding is how can we explore innovation in avocado size, flesh color, skin color as ways to differentiate? And what is the avocado of the future that shoppers really want? So I think that's an area we need to look at. So, if we look sort of totally, there is a need for New Zealand innovation and adaptation. And I think there's a couple of keys for me about how you get there, really. The first thing is around collaboration. It's kind of, particularly red meat and dairy, is there more we can do by breaking down silos, in those sectors to create unified strategies and therefore leverage cross-industry innovation. And I know it's difficult because we've got kind of shareholders and corporates and investors, and we've got the weight of history. But I think if the country wants to get, the maximum out of the assets it's got, higher degree of collaboration is necessary. Secondly, diversification. So, how do we move beyond commodity exports to branded, premium, higher value consumer goods? So, protein enriched dairy products, alternative red meat cuts, unique wines. How can we do that? And New Zealand is uniquely placed to bring those innovations to market with an amazing backstory of provenance. And then, thirdly, there needs to be an investment into sustainability and kind of regen ag, really, to, and it's hard to understate this in terms of what's happening in particularly the European market. In order to address climate change, emissions, ethical concern, as well as embrace kind of, regen farming, water conservation, and low carbon supply chains, there's a big agenda here. And I think New Zealand needs to get after it a bit quicker for me. And then lastly, that global brand positioning, going beyond just kind of clean and green, needs to highlight innovation. And hence it needs the proof points that we've talked about. Craftsmanship, artisanal quality where needed, those quality differentiations, as well as leveraging, really cute country of origin marketing strategies. That's really important. So I think if New Zealand starts to get after those four, and indeed if individual firms get after those four, and that's a lot of our work, then good things start to happen really quite quickly. So thank you for listening. And I'm really curious to say, look, if any of these thoughts resonated with you, and please let me know. I'll be delighted to talk further. So just drop me a line on the email here, and we can continue the conversation. And if there's anything we can do to help, I'd love to. Thank you.